All right. I'd say I haven't done one of these in a long time, but I always say that because it's always true. Uh, so I'm going to jump right in. Uh, I got to say, I was sort of inspired by Sydney Sweeney. Uh, like I said, obviously, pretty young woman. And then I saw her in little clips from like Euphoria and such. And I'm like, wow, she can, really act and such. I saw her with that movie with the Nolan guy who was in Top Gun. I mean, that was a cute rom com, but rom coms are, you know, uh, like shallow reflections of like When Harry Met Sally at best. But her, what I'm talking about today is that interview with that just smug leftist woman going, oh well, your genes thing brought up these people about the good genes of white people, and I know you kind of essentially want to disavow the white supremacy. I mean, that's paraphrasing. That was the gist. And Sweeney proving, I'm not saying she's better than me, but she definitely has far more forbearance than I would. I would be ready to launch into a diatribe about, who cares what the internet thinks? And, I mean, let's talk, genetic inheritance. And Sweeney's just like, when I have something to say on some matter, I'll say it, and leaves it like that. It was just, it's brilliant in its way, since it just completely, like, decimates the woman who was asking the question. Um, Somebody wrote, and I just, this guy Hunter Ash, he writes some pretty good stuff, and he wrote the best, I guess, takedown of the interviewer and her, again, just overly self-satisfied, kind of leftist manner. And so I'm going to read this off because this is the interviewer who was just assuming, right? Sydney Sweeney was on the same page as she was, and she would then, jump on the bandwagon together, and they'd go off like gangbusters. He goes, the thing you have to remember about this woman, interviewer, and those like her, is that she generally doesn't know that anyone disagrees with her basic worldview. She doesn't even see it as a worldview. It's just the obvious truth. Of course she knows abstractly that half the country voted for Trump. But those aren't people. Those are cartoon characters. They're either fat, slobbering rednecks in Klan hoods or mustache-twirling robber barons manipulating the rednecks for profit. Her mental models of them are less complex than her mental model of a squirrel. Anyone she might actually sit down and talk to is, of course, a person, and therefore agrees with the obvious truth. It is inconceivable to her that anyone capable of being pleasant dinner party guests would not share her basic beliefs and values. She wasn't trying to do a gotcha or extract a pledge of fealty. She was certain that Sydney Sweeney is a person, and therefore only got mixed up in the whole genes G fiasco by mistake. She was trying to do Sydney a favor by giving her a chance to clarify that she is in fact a human being who agrees with all the things all the other real people agree with. Anyway, I thought that was brilliant writing because it runs the edge of satire and absolute truth. Anyway, that's my take on that. Sydney Sweeney kind of now being like, whatever she's going to be in for a while, I just watch it just for solidarity on that moment. It's so great not to be disappointed by artists. I had a long conversation with somebody who is obviously a big venture capital guy, and he was opining on what we can do to help people, help young people get educated. Smart, certainly a smart guy, had just a vast overestimation of what, of what education can actually do. I'm not going to bore anybody with the highlights or the lowlights. It's just, we both agreed, or his premise was simply came down to, well, if if everybody had a personal tutor, they'd do much better. And I'm like, it actually wouldn't raise people's IQ more than about 5 points. It would, of course, give them far more skills and knowledge. Um, Obviously, it's completely impractical. You cannot scale that in any way. But anyway, it was one of those rare moments online where you have someone who is obviously bright and, just going to have a genuine good faith disagreement on. Essentially, I just thought he was totally overvaluing the importance of hard work. And I kind of got out of him, um, he was like, "Oh yeah, I really didn't study, and I got a 1600, and a lot of my family did." And then at the end, he's like, "Oh yeah, and my grandfather won a Nobel Prize." And I'm like, "Yes, sir. Inheritance and IQ is very real." And saying that it was just 1600 was just about doing the hard work. This is exactly what Richard Feynman said. Okay, Richard Feynman won a Nobel in physics. He was a polymath and a damn good bongo player. I mean, early part of the Manhattan Project, his Nobel had to do with essentially, and I shouldn't say essentially because my understanding of someone is a way to do like quantum calculations in a much easier way. It's way more complicated than that, and I would do it an injustice to try to explain it. But I mean, incredibly clever. He was on the NASA committee that looked into the space shuttle, the Challenger disaster, and famously showed how it was the O-rings and the rubber, and how if it's cold, it freezes. He had some rubber put in his glass of water, and he took it out, and he showed how it was bendy, and it froze, and then it just snapped. Okay, so the guy is just brilliant. And when asked about his accomplishments, he, of course, played the humble. I was really I wasn't special. I was just curious, and I really like to work on things. That, of course, is a humble brag. It's actually ego talking there, because instead of saying I was incredibly gifted and, I pursued my passion, right? You're saying, well, it was just hard work. So it was all on me. It wasn't anything, I didn't start out way ahead of anyone, right? So it's always an interesting, these very these high IQ people who also want to take credit for having, because if it's just hard work, then it's just grit. It's just determination. Anyone could achieve what I could do as long as they had the heart. And I'm like, that's not true. I mean, and as, look at, if you know the TV show Big Bang, look at Wolowitz and then look at a young LeBron James and tell me that somehow it's just hard work. They both could achieve the same results in the NBA. Of course, that's ridiculous. But for some reason, if you start talking about IQ and such, then, it's just everybody has the potential to be nearly great or whatever. And I'm like, no. If you take someone who tests at 6 or 7 years old with 100 IQ, and you work them and you're one of those cinematic dads that's, instead of sports, it's all about math and everything. They will never be a theoretical physicist. Okay? The same way Wolowitz is never going to play in the NBA. It's just, it's not complicated, but people have difficulty, wanting to believe that and everything. And I get it, but I'm not here to pander to your prejudices. What else? I haven't done these for a while, so it's my fault if I don't exactly remember what I've covered. Epstein Island, which was initially, when Biden was president, was used by the Republicans. I know I've said this in another podcast, but maybe I'm extrapolating on it. Is that was used by the Republicans and talk radio guys to go, what's going on there? And they're hiding it, and all that stuff. And he was killed, and blah blah blah. And now, of course, because Trump's in power, and they don't seem to have any more prosecutions or anything. Now it's Trump that's hiding it. Okay, I've said Epstein Island is Scooby-Doo meets Caligula. Okay, the idea that wealthy men, and wealth does strongly correlate with intelligence, would band together to feast on underage girls right? And thus implicate all of them if any of them ran afoul of the law, right? You've got 20 guys in a conspiracy and one guy gets nicked for frickin' insider trading. Well, then he's going to give up. Hey, I can trade my way out of that with this. So yeah, it's all nonsense. Jeffrey Epstein was just a star fucker. He liked, hobnobbing with, he had dinner with Katie Couric. Okay. The person that was involved in procuring him young women was, what's her name? Maxwell, G. Maxwell. I can never say is Ghislaine or something. Okay. That is it. The idea is if you study, what the FBI has been doing since 2015, going after Trump in just, manifold different ways. Everything from Comey to the Russian dossier, fake Russian dossier, to just, a cavalcade of leaks that under Biden, they had the goods on Trump and pedophilia, and they didn't use it. I mean, they were using Letitia James to prosecute him for, potential documents that didn't assay his net worth correctly. It's, but it's more of that. Let me go. Oh, dang, I just flipped over. Somebody pointed out Nancy Pelosi's retiring, and I don't know exactly the numbers, but Nancy Pelosi as a traitor, D-E-R, not traitor, not perfidious or anything. I don't know exactly the numbers, and I don't know what the stretch is, but she has been a better investor than everyone. She beats Warren. I'll call Mr. Buffett Warren. We're on a first name basis. Okay. So it's just that, how obvious that she's profited from knowing where things were going to be going. What else? Oh, so here's a great little, most people I don't know about this, I'm sure. The mayor of Coldwater, Kansas, Jose Joe Ceballos. Well, it turns out that Joe's not actually an American, that he's an illegal alien. And yeah, he's been voting in elections for, I don't know, at least a half a dozen years. I was told that I was told that, illegal aliens never vote. But I was definitely under the impression that you couldn't be an illegal alien and run for office and become a mayor of a city. Anyway, imagine my surprise. I'm definitely not gonna. I definitely got more to say here. John Brennan, CIA former guy, getting called out at a Q&A, which was really sweet. I've already talked at length though about the 51 Intel experts in their bullshit. Hunter Biden's laptop has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. So I'm not going to buy that. I'm trying to do new stuff, man. I guess, what comes up, and I've seen this a couple places, what I have been, this is my lollipop. I've been told I shouldn't eat while I do this, though, so I'm kind of just letting it float. Is that, maybe this will be my thing. I'll always have a lollipop in my hand. Be like Telly Savalas on Kojak. Who loves you, babe? I know that's being lost. That reference is lost on everyone. Is, how much the Democrats, even after, Trump wins and everything, how they have, and not just the fringe, I mean, maybe to the middle, how they've held on to this, men can be women, men should be allowed in women's sports. You have, what's her name, Spanberger in Virginia, who's running for governor of Virginia, who won against the black woman, Winston Searles, I think, or something like that, who gave a 2.5 minute word salad answer to that, when of course she should just be like, no, they can't. It's completely unfair. So, and still got elected. The AG of Virginia, who had those texts where he wished his opponent's children would be murdered so that it would give his opponent some empathy. He won too. A little more disquieting since the man is the attorney general, the lead, prosecutor of the justice system in Virginia. It just shows, again, my initial entree into this, which is Democrats are not going to give up the identity, the just abject foolishness of those policies, that it's more center than you think, because that's why politicians won't answer that, because they've obviously looked at, polling data. And then the AG's comments, it's obvious how, like Charlie Kirk's murder changed nothing. And there's half the country that thinks the other half are fascists, and they're being led by, a lieutenant of Satan. Of course, they don't believe in Satan and all that stuff, but and that's a little hyperbolic, and I will admit that, but it's only a bit hyperbolic. So yeah, I was struck by that for sure. Somebody, and again, this is all just, I'm going through, somebody said how Sinners was a mediocre movie. I definitely agree. I wouldn't go for, it's the one that was highly touted, the black vampires in, is it the Creole South? It's a better than average vampire movie, which again doesn't say much. It's like rom-coms with a nice little kind of, Louisiana vibe, and, but that's it. I don't know why it's being so celebrated. It did do well though. Kind of, caught somewhat of her zeitgeist. Oh, here's something. Okay. Nick Fuentes and the Tucker Carlson interview and how that blew up, and Ben Shapiro's rebuttal. Okay. I had heard of Nick Fuentes, but just, on the fringe. I would have told you he's some kind of podcaster who says ridiculous things, who got invited to a Trump. I think he got invited to Mar-a-Lago, which now, upon my reflection, that was a bad decision, President Trump, or whoever, did that. But I had so Ben Shapiro comes out, guns blazing, clips of Nick Fuentes, this soy boy beta male who I guess has a huge following amongst white males, because he's going around like a 6-year-old who in a group who's the first one to learn to say fuck or something, Nazis and niggers, it's my Führer day. Okay. He's got all this gay affect. I'm like, how are young men following this guy? I don't get it. I'm like, at least with guys like, what's his name, Tate or Blazerian. Okay, they give off the whole I'm a macho guy and stuff. And sure, I'm talking crazy nonsense oh yeah, the Jews control things, and the Holocaust wasn't real and all that. But at least it's a masculine, I don't want to say use affect again, but yeah. But I don't understand this guy. So Shapiro makes excellent points. I'm okay. I agree with them. And then to make sure I wasn't, hey, is Ben taking things out of context? I watched some more, and if anything, became more disgusted. And not just, I'm disgusted in people. Who are you? Why are you following this person? That's just, I think you end up having it's so disappointing. I always say it's because it's supposed to be white males, and I'm like, okay. And the example I always use is Louis C.K. Okay, Louis C.K. was a funny guy. He was a comedian. He was good, right? And then it came out that he had a habit of masturbating with women around. Okay, and then he apologized in a very funny letter, because my take from I was disappointed in him. Like, dude, what are you doing? We were on the same team, and now you're doing this. And I don't want to be on the team with the guy who thinks somehow it's okay to jerk off in front of women. Well, they didn't really ever complain or something. Like, what? It's a little bit, and this is a twisted version of in Avengers when Tony Stark, everybody's trying to lift Thor's hammer, and of course Tony can't. And then he's got War Machine, the black guy, I forget, and they're doing together. It's like, are you on the same team? My team, represent, right? that's my law. Like, I feel like I don't want to be in the team that thinks somehow Nick Fuentes is anything other than some dweeby nobody with ridiculous ideas. Now, the only reason I'm bringing this up or that it's important is, okay, so it jumps on my radar. Supposedly, you know, I don't know with the bots, he's got all these followers. You know, is it a schism in the right? I don't want to go down that, you know. And of course, by my criticizing him, I found that I get attacked for all these people like, you know, oh, you know, you love the Jews or something, just nonsense stuff. But what's disappointing, another layer of disappointment is Tucker Carlson, who, you know, yes, I knew him on Fox and I've liked lots of things he said. I've even understood when he, you know, he was arguing like he was in Russia. Look how clean this is, the subways. You know, he was making a somewhat of a fascist argument, like, you know, the subways are clean, the grocery stores are clean. I thought he was inartfully talking about here is the choice between, you know, order and the extreme kind of, you know, unreasoning left we have where, you know, you know, the lawlessness that, you know what I mean, there's a big kind of, there's a big range, and I think he wanted to tack more towards, you know, law and order. That's fine. And he's a populist, and he's against, like, you know, America's involvement in any outside conflicts, right? Which I, in large part, agree with. But right away, and I mean, I know that Megyn Kelly hasn't wanted to call him out and stuff because they're friends, and I get that. But that wouldn't stop me because as my son accurately said, Dad, people like you. They like you a lot until they don't. Because yes, I just not going to tolerate, you know, nonsense. In Carlson's interview with Fuentes just, again, complete just numbskull. I mean, I just, you know, scalawag, just, you know, zero. Cypher's like, oh, that was on November 8th or December 18th, and that's Stalin's birthday. I'm a big fan of Stalin. With all these, like, I'm a big fan of Stalin. I'm like, dude, you're trying, just be gay. He's a big fan of Stalin. And Carlson's like, well, we'll circle back to that. We never circle back to that. Okay. Why do we want to circle back to that? If I'm interviewing him, I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Right? Because first off, yeah, I happen to have a degree in U.S. Soviet history. I want to know how you got there, right? Or are you just some, you know, 14-year-old who thinks they can say something provocative, you know, as all those guys do. Oh, it was really Churchill who started, you know, just because you say the sky is orange doesn't make you smart, okay? It just makes you obnoxious. And I'm going to get the aphorism wrong, but it's like, you know, better to be quiet and not reveal you're an idiot than to speak and to make it clear to everyone. But okay, so there was that, right? I kind of gone off on that for a bit. My whole take on that. So just going through things. Oh yeah, Zoran won. Somebody was talking about how, yeah, he wants to get rid of like elite public schools. That's just awful. It's awful for actually poor kids who could use they need that access, because otherwise it's just going to be rich people who pay for a private school who can make their schools more elite. It's the entire left's. I mean, the left hates elitism. They hate excellence. They want to very socialistically, hey Zoran, bring everybody down to some common denominator. Unless you're a POC, unless you're a person of color, you are in some, what they believe is marginalized group. This is a baseball thing. And I know I've mentioned this, I got a little bit of traction because I guess there's a contemporary Hall of Fame panel. So they bring in so Dale Murphy of the Atlanta Braves from the 80s, excellent ball player. seems to have really great stats, and he did not get in. So then you can kind of revisit it with players. Okay, can we stop? Can we stop letting writers choose the Hall of Fame? Okay, we don't let ball players choose the Pulitzer. Anything past that, and I'm glad to debate it, but if you disagree with me, it's because you're wrong. All right, and I know I'm not going to go further down that because I know I have ranted about that before. There's some people, even some people who listen to this video cast, who believe that Mamdani's election is a great thing because, like George Will, famous old Washington Post columnist, said, it's going to be really instructive to people that they're going to see how socialism works. We need this every quarter century, so it dissuades, all these people kind of going down that path. The reality, it hits them in the face. Right? They get mugged by reality. It's another way to say that. I think that's overly optimistic. I think that if you can look at boomers, and there's a huge amount of all these protests are all these old people who want to think it's 1968 again. Now, I get that from a generational standpoint. Everybody wants to think, they want to think the Stones and Paul McCartney are still just cutting edge. They're still bringing the great music, right? No, they're not, and no one's listening. Okay, but if you can equate that, to your early life, that makes you're still young in some way, right? Some mystical, and that's understandable. That's human, but it's not all that. It's that a lot of these, boomers never gave up that left wing ideology, and in fact, they've just kind of dug themselves deeper. They've been successful enough where now they're completely insulated from any of actual, the effects of all their left-wing silliness. So I don't, obviously it's subjective. We can see how it plays out. But I think that those people who think that are being optimistic, I'm much more pessimistic that people don't learn. Not enough. Certainly some people do. I also referenced Secondhand Time, which is a great book. I wish I could tell you who it's by. Her name it's Russian, something like Alexander, whatever. Okay, it won the Nobel Prize, deservedly so. And I say that as someone who's rather jaded, who reads Pulitzer Prize winning and Nobel Prize winning books. And sometimes it's like, what? No, this is great. And what it is a oral account that she masterfully turns into like a narrative of all these old people who went through all the depredations of the Soviet Union and their pursuit of socialism in one state. To quote Stalin, bringing it back there to Mr. Silly Fuentes. Got to be like Trump and think of some derogatory but base kind of denigration of him. Fewer Fuentes. I don't know. I got to think. But Secondhand Time, and it's obviously very revealing about Soviet history. But what it does is it shines a light on the human condition. And all these people, I mean, if you're going to pull out threads of it, I wouldn't say all, but huge amount are like, yes, we're old now. We went through such privations. I mean, if, getting an orange, the fruit, on celebrating New Year's was a big thing in the Soviet Union for most people. Okay. And just you can kind of go downstream from there. Once you accept that, it's like, we went through all these things. Socialism was not just a failed experiment. Socialism, we now understand, doesn't work. It imprisoned and killed millions of people in our country. Some of them were in our own family, grandparents and such, right? Or they came back broken. Okay, all of this is true. But we believed in something. And that's why when you think you can show people socialism doesn't work and it's going to encourage them or change their mind, There's a great example. Those people go on to decry, now it's not, it's not socialism, it's salamis. You know, oh, what does capitalism give us? Steak and salami, bacon. And I'm like, yeah, it gives you a much better quality of life, but if you don't have a religion, socialism is the religion. So there's my like little pushback on one of my friends who in the IRL in real life who was disagreeing with me on that. I wish that was the case. And the irony is he lives in New York. Okay. Looking here, some of the things I already mentioned again, the Hall of Fame, don't get me started. Somebody actually retweeted my thing there and said, actually, that's a good point. And I'm like no one thinks of that. Like, if I want to know who a great basketball player is, I'm not going to go ask some guy who's been reporting on, the Golden State Warriors for the last dozen years, who can't make a left-handed layup. I'm going to talk to Michael Jordan, who I can even, I remember in the documentary Jordan did, it's a great example of it, because you don't have to be the greatest basketball player to know this. They were talking about like the second incarnation of the Bulls. And he was like, I brought Dennis Rodman to the team. I knew, he had stuff outside. He had issues and such like that. Okay? I didn't really concern me. I knew what he could do on the basketball court. Wow. Maybe that kind of mind should be allowed to vote for who gets into the House of Holies, the things that all the players, the only individual honor that players can actually control, right? Charles Barkley, I think is, a really great human, love to sit and have a beer with him, never won a championship. That's a knock on him, which he's stepped into and admitted, right? But at the end of the day, he couldn't really help that. And it hurt that, you're going up against Jordan and stuff like that. Jordan takes a break, and then I think the Rockets win. Do the Rockets win too? Does Akeem win then? Okay. Again, it's back a ways. Right? So again, I want the opinions of the people that sweated and bled and won and lost. Like I said, I've thrown out in baseball. See, I'm going back on this. Maybe if you played in 1,000 games, okay, that's like 6 full seasons. So you'd probably have to play more than 6 full seasons because you're going to miss. Now they do that whole too. They hold you out. I'm open to debate on how many games, but let's say 1,000. It's got a good, it's kind of a binary thing, right? So yeah, let's do that, and we can discuss from there. But again, okay, sorry, I got it back on my little hobby horse, okay. And I never had a hobby horse, but I did have one with springs, and it was really cool when I was a little kid because you go back and forth, and it got pretty crazy. And then when I got a little older, 6 or 7, the little riders, then you could bounce it and you could actually get air. You could get like 3 feet up in the air and come crashing down on the ground. And my grandmother, I was in her house, would always think that I was breaking something. And I was like, no, we're just bouncing. You got to like toys that have like that you could use at a certain age and then pick up and use again. There were other ones. Nothing comes to mind at the time, but I know there were other ones that I later found out. There was something, and I just posted it. And again, because I'm going off the top of my head, electric football. Okay, electric football was a game. I had it. It was in the 70s. It was a big piece of metal that had yard lines and everything, and you had little plastic men, and you could turn the bottoms so you could hypothetically control how they moved, right? And you had 2 teams. Okay, and what you did, it was really simple. You plugged it into the wall. And the evil genius, I want to know who created the game because, he's up there with Bin Laden. You just turned it on and it vibrated. So the guys moved. So your guy who had the ball, you could design him and then he could run and he had blockers. Okay, the guy posted this and he said, I think like this is the greatest... This one toy, it wasn't even toy. It's like, the anticipation of something being good and what it actually was is like the largest in human history. And I was like, yes, because the thing was just terrible. It didn't work. All the guys ran off into the corners. I mean, it was just terrible. And I know it just got me going from like, like a toy that we would just turn it on and watch things buzz around, throw dimes and nickels on it and see if it didn't get used. It was terrible when I was a kid. It was terrible when I was older. But yeah, it just gave me a flashback to the worst toy I ever got. Yeah. And I think I wanted it at the time. Interesting. I'm looking forward to this. I think December 28th in Dubai. If anybody wants to fly me there, I'll even just go first class. The woman's number one seed, who I admit I didn't know it's Ariane. It's not Ariane. I'm not probably saying her name. Ariana Sabalenka against Nick Kyrgios, who's number 652. They are going to have a match. And yeah, I want to watch him. He's a pretty solid guy. He's going to destroy her. Because, of course, men and women can't be in the same. Can't play the same games. Serena and Venus Williams got killed by, strongly defeated by like the number 200 and something guy. What else? Mike Pence has got a book out. Ooh, the ultimate vanilla politician, right? Who, and it's what conservatives believe. I have nothing to say on it. He was never someone I thought had any kind of intellectual vigor, and, he makes bland look spicy. I'm sure he's a nice man, though. But I bristle at that somehow he thinks that people are asking for that, that he's taken serious, Ken Burns of the great Civil War documentary, which I might have watched maybe 6 times, forced both kids at different times to watch that. To their great credit, both Charlie and Chloe have liked it a great deal, asked questions and such. His American Revolution one is coming out in a couple weeks. I will watch it. He has since become a crazy leftist. I hope it hasn't infected his take on American history. I'm hopeful, right? Also, I have the Civil War documentary, the entire box set on disc, if you'd like to borrow it. But you got to return it. It's that and my Tony Horton PS90s. I want those back. I actually still have a thing that can run a DVD off the TV. Dick Cheney died. Okay. Again, somebody who went crazy anti-Trump, whose daughter was supposedly going to be the next thought leader of conservatism, who after the left was done using her in their failed attempts to get Kamala Harris over the finish line, I haven't seen her on anything anymore. It's almost like she was just being used and would be tossed aside. But Dick, Dick was a guy who I admired. I admired Dick, and I would say that he was a proto-Trump for me, and in my advice, 20 years ago, because when people went after him, the media did, they went after him in a nearly Trumpian fashion, okay? Very aggressive, very, well, you must agree this, that, or that, this, that, or the other thing. And I was always just happily pleased. Cheney didn't give an inch and said, no, you're wrong, and bang. He never accepted, like a Mitt Romney would, well, I know that a lot of people in conservatives are kind of bad, but really like me, okay? No, Cheney was a pit bull. He didn't concede anything. And that's, of course, what Trump does as well, to better effect, but it's the same idea. And it was something that I had always advocated against, and then I saw Cheney do it. And I was like, yeah, we need more of that kind of muscular conservatism. And again, and a much more active attack on the predicate of the left. And this was, the 20th century or so. Um, that's what I liked about Dick. And yes, I'm saying that on purpose. Um, so I'm sorry he's dead. He lived to 84. I saw, and I retweeted it, but my facts are a little bit off. But Dick Cheney is also the poster boy for the advances in medicine, and I mean, if you want to start making a case for, why does healthcare cost so much more and everything? There's lots of reasons, but one major reason is that, in 1950, 60, maybe even 1970, if you went to the hospital, a lot of people were going to the hospital to die. Okay. And I know I've made this point before, right? And now you go to the hospital and they fix you and you get better. Maybe you're not 100% anymore, but you can soldier on. Dick Cheney had a heart attack, his first heart attack at 30, and then in his 30s, and then another one in his 40s. That motherfucker should be dead, right? And then I think in 50, he had like quadruple bypass, and then he had some stent thing because he was going down and he lived to 84. Well, medicine kept him alive, did a lot of things that they wouldn't have been able to do. They didn't have CTs and tomography and all those, so that's one of the reasons healthcare. But another, interesting take on Dick, right? Won't get to say that much anymore because he's gone. Candace Owens is really fucking crazy. She just kind of keeps going with the crazy. She was crazy, and then Charlie Kirk got killed, and now she's talking about Mossad agents with phones at the, what was it, in Ohio or whatever, at the rally. It's always interesting that the conspiracists, that whatever evil cabal has pulled off the killing of Kennedy, the killing of Kirk, the vast, conspiracy to rule the world, they've always left, though, breadcrumbs. They've always left clues that only these very special, gifted people can figure out. These Mossad agents who had these phones, I didn't see anything more than her saying that, right? Why didn't they just get burner phones? Or why didn't they just get phones, like, why didn't they go to the Apple store and, get a phone under a fake? It's always, there's clues. Because if you're, I'm not smart in the rest of my life, but here I've got it figured out. It's so transparently like, dude, you're desperate to feel smart. Now you think you've got some kind of insight. And the other point is, ooh, all this crazy, terrible shit happens, but there's an evil plan. So at least there's a plan, right? Kennedy got killed by one guy, okay? Lee Harvey Oswald. I need to say that because then people think it's probably somebody else. I mean, more like, yeah, Nick Fuentes is a crazy fuck who, needs to be minimized as quickly as possible. I did disagree with the gay lumberjack, somebody who follows me, who I follow. Very smart, impressive guy. I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, who's gay? He's not. There's no false advertising, at least from what he implies. But he was saying, I went from Dick to the gay lumberjack. Okay, you got to go where it is. You got to go where the story is. He was saying like people like Nick Fuentes shouldn't be platformed. Okay, that's very left wing to me, and I disagree. I admit I am of the generation who came back from school and made myself a couple turkey sandwiches and sat down and either watched in real time or video was just, and watched Phil Donahue. That white-haired, of course, kind of went much more left, but who would run up and down, his studio with a mic, who had people up on the stage who were gay, trans, all the crazier stuff he had, and he would let people speak their mind. And I'm for that because, and this is where I'm an optimist, and maybe, about human nature, is that, I want people to announce that they're a Nazi so that I can eviscerate their arguments. I don't want that existing in the corners and the shadows. I do think if you can bring that out and you can debate with those people, that overall people will be like, oh, well, that guy's a joke, right? Again, that's an optimistic take on humans, which I admit, like my earlier socialism, that's not so optimistic. So you can, you know, you can push back. I do not have a universal, I do not have an ideology. I'm trying to be, driven by facts and history and the way people react, But I'll point out where even I'm like, I do that on the SAT. My coaching, I've got these rules, like shorter is typically better on the grammar. But I'll point out to a student where I'm like, look, that's an exception, right? Because grammar is rife with exceptions because it's not math. Language is organic. But yeah, I'm always trying to, again, get to the truth as close as I can. Another great, one of a Illinois congressman who, was there forever, he's never going to be defeated, his incumbent, was running. And on the last day where you could announce, your candidacy so that you were going to challenge him, the politician, his name's like Jesus Chuy Garcia, the politician's chief of staff, put himself in as a candidate. Now you're like, what? He's going to run against his boss? This is, we can make a Netflix show from that, right? I mean, it's a good idea. Okay. Oh, no. Jesus is now going to get out of the race so that his chief of staff, which who knows how much bad shit he knows to get him to agree to that, his chief of staff will be able to basically run. It's Illinois. I think it's near Chicago. It's a total Democratic, district. So he's giving there won't be any, he's going to run against a Republican who gets usually 10 or 12% of the vote. So yeah, wow. That's not just totally disenfranchising, even Democrat voters. I did also see that, Proposition 50 passed, even though my family, all 5 of us, voted against it. It's just more insane gerrymandering. Certainly Republicans have done it too. They will now do it more. I think if you crunch the numbers, the Republicans will win that, overall through it. So I'm like, okay, this is, again, it just shows you, again, the widening schism, the renunciation of norms and everything. I mean, and as a Californian, I'm like, wow, you really don't care about my vote, unless it's for a Democrat. A little unsettling. I've run pretty long here. So, I mean, while I could talk about more, I don't think I will. I think I'll cut it short there. Not cutting it short. It's 48 minutes, 20 seconds. Also, when I make them longer, then I download them onto the X, and then it takes it a while to do it. Anyway, hope everyone's well. And yeah, feel free to comment.